This is the truth.
Yeah.
I have been going into supermarkets or department stores or whatever, walking along the street, and people will stop me and say, "Why did you leave? Why aren't you doing your show anymore?" And I said, "I have never quit."
Lucille Ball took one look at her new co-star in 1951 and said no. She was too pretty, too polished, too much of a threat. The woman had 1 week to prove herself, so she dyed her hair, hid her figure, and transformed into someone plain enough to stay. For 6 years, she made America laugh while swallowing humiliation every single day. There were rumors about weight clauses, whispers about pay gaps, and a resentment that grew so deep it followed them both for decades. The woman who helped build television's greatest comedy was slowly being destroyed by it. Lucille Ball came into the world on August 6, 1911, in Jamestown, New York, but peace did not stay with her for long. Before she was old enough to understand what home even meant, her family was already moving from place to place. Her father, Henry Ball, chased work wherever he could find it, first in Montana, and then in Wyandotte, Michigan, where he worked as a telephone lineman. By the time Lucille was 3, she had already lived in several states. Nothing stayed still. Nothing lasted. Long before she became a woman who built entire worlds on sound stages and held audiences close with perfect control. She was a child learning that life could shift overnight and take everything with it. Then, in February 1915, the shift became something much darker. Typhoid fever spread through their Michigan community, and Lucille's father fell sick after eating contaminated dairy. He was only 27 when he died on February 28, 1915. Lucille was just 3 years old. Her little brother was still a baby. Years later, she would say that this loss became her first real memory. She remembered the strange mood in the house. She remembered the whispers. She remembered a bird trapped indoors on the day he died. That moment stayed in her mind and split her life in two. There was the world before her father disappeared, and then there was everything that came after. After his death, the family returned to Jamestown, and what remained of Lucille's childhood was shaped by absence. Her mother, Dee, now had 2 children and no steady support. She did what she could, taking jobs wherever she found them, often far from home or for long hours. That meant Lucille and her younger brother were often left in Celeron with their grandparents. To a little girl already carrying the shadow of her father's death, it felt like another kind of loss. One parent was buried. The other was always leaving to survive. So while other children ran home to neat little families that seemed whole, Lucille grew up in a house full of tension, strong opinions, and the constant feeling that love could be interrupted by hardship at any moment. Her grandfather, Fred Hunt, was a force in that house. He was strict, intense, and deeply political. He believed fiercely in socialism and admired labor leaders like Eugene Debs. He saw the world as a fight between ordinary people and the powerful, and he carried those beliefs into family life. For Lucille, growing up under him meant growing up under pressure. Even years later, his influence followed her. In 1936, when she was a struggling actress in Hollywood, she signed a voter registration affidavit connected to the Communist Party because her aging grandfather wanted her to. She later said she did it only to please him and never attended meetings or took part in anything beyond that single act. Yet, that one decision would come back years later and nearly wreck her career when investigators turned it into a public scandal. Even as an adult, she was still dealing with the weight of the house she had grown up in. Yet somewhere inside all that strain, she found one place where she could breathe. Around age 12, Lucille started stepping onto local stages in Jamestown and nearby Celeron. School plays and amateur performances gave her something rare. They gave her attention, but more than that, they gave her shape. On stage, she was no longer the girl from the broken home or the child marked by loss. For a few precious moments, she became the center of the room. That feeling got into her bones fast. Then, as she entered her mid-teens, her life turned again. She began seeing an older local boy, a relationship that frightened her mother badly enough to act. Deed scraped together what little money she had and sent Lucille to New York City, hoping distance would save her daughter and maybe open a better future. So around 1925, Lucille arrived in New York and entered the John Murray Anderson School for the Dramatic Arts. It sounded glamorous from the outside. It sounded like the door to everything she wanted. But inside, it was a brutal shock. She was young, unsure of herself, and surrounded by polished students who looked as if they already belonged to another world. Instead of encouragement, she got rejection. The school did not see promise in her. Teachers judged her shy, stiff, and lacking presence. Before long, the tuition her mother had struggled to gather was refunded, and Lucille was sent home with a verdict that stung for years. In her own memory, it came down to two crushing words: no talent. That could have ended the story right there, but Lucille Ball was never built to disappear quietly. She stayed in New York and kept going, even when the city gave her almost nothing back. She drifted through auditions, watched classes, chased scraps of opportunity, and slowly learned what it meant to survive without comfort. This was the late 1920s, and the timing could not have been worse. She wanted vaudeville, wanted the stage, wanted that live current between performer and crowd, but the world was changing. Talking pictures were taking over. Old paths were closing. Jobs were disappearing. More than once, she had almost no money. She later admitted just how bad it got. She starved, not in the dramatic way people use the word casually, but for real. She stretched food however she could. She lived cheaply, badly, and often uncertainly. At times she was sick for long stretches. The dream remained alive, but the road toward it was harsh and humiliating. Because she needed to eat, she took modeling work. One of the most important jobs came with Hattie Carnegie, the famous fashion businesswoman. It was not glamorous in the way people later imagined. It was survival. Lucille modeled hats and expensive clothing for wealthy clients, while her own life remained shaky underneath. She was told to bleach her brown hair blonde. She learned how to stand, move, and present herself with elegance. She wore luxury she could not afford and sold an image she did not yet own. The pay helped, but only barely. Still, this period mattered. It taught her control. It taught her posture. It taught her how appearance could become performance. Even when she later joked that modeling had never been her true path, it helped sharpen the woman the camera would one day love. From there, she moved into bigger commercial work. In the early 1930s, she became part of a national Chesterfield cigarette campaign under the name Diane Belmont. Her face appeared on huge billboards, selling a polished version of glamour to a country deep in the Depression. It was strange, really. She was becoming visible everywhere while still struggling behind the image. Yet those ads helped push her into larger circles, and soon the path led west. In 1933, she arrived in Hollywood for what was supposed to be a short job as a Goldwyn girl in Roman scandals. The trip was meant to last weeks. Instead, it became the rest of her life. Hollywood, though, did not welcome her as a star. It used her. She signed contracts, appeared in film after film, and kept working. But much of that work came in tiny roles, low-budget productions, and supporting parts that never let her fully break through. She was beautiful, funny, sharp, and unusually skilled at physical comedy. Yet the studios often saw her as filler. She worked through the 1930s and early 1940s in a blur of B-movies, chorus parts, and small appearances. She earned the nickname Queen of the Bees, which sounded playful on the surface but carried a sting underneath. It meant she was useful, but not fully trusted. It meant she was close to stardom but kept just outside the real circle. Still, she kept pushing. Even when she did land stronger parts in films like Stage Door or Five Came Back, the deeper system did not change for her. Other actresses were promoted harder. Other faces were treated as the future. Lucille worked longer, learned faster, and rehearsed harder than many around her. But executives still saw limits where she saw possibility. At one point, she even appeared in a Three Stooges short, getting pulled into rough physical comedy in a way that fit her instincts better than the studio understood. It was not presented as a step up, it was just another low rung. Yet even there, she was learning. Every bruise, every dismissal, every cheap assignment added another layer to her timing and toughness. By the mid-1940s, the disappointment deepened. She had spent years in the system, made dozens of films, and still the great breakthrough refused to come. MGM signed her for a period, changed her look, and kept trying to place her. But even then, she often ended up back in projects that did not fully use what she could do. As younger actresses arrived and studio ideas of glamour shifted, she began to feel something colder closing in. She was in her 30s now, and Hollywood had a cruel habit of acting as though women had expiration dates. Lucille could feel that judgment hovering around her. After years of effort, she still was not being treated like the leading woman she knew she could be. Then radio entered the picture and quietly changed everything. In 1948, she began starring in My Favorite Husband on CBS. It gave her something film had refused to hand her for years. It gave her the center. Week after week, she played Liz Cooper, a funny, impulsive wife whose schemes and energy let Lucille's comic instincts breathe at full strength. Audiences loved her. The role fit. The timing clicked. The old label of not enough began to crack. For the first time in a long time, she was not just surviving in entertainment. She was leading in it. Around all of this, her personal life had become just as intense as her career. In 1940, while filming Too Many Girls, she met Desi Arnaz. He was young, magnetic, and full of life. Their chemistry hit fast and hard. They married the same year, almost recklessly, as though speed itself could protect the feeling. But that marriage carried storms from the beginning. Desi toured constantly. Lucille worked brutal studio schedules. They missed each other, fought, reunited, and then fought again. Rumors of infidelity followed him. His drinking worsened over time. Lucille wanted stability and family. Instead, she often got distance, worry, and heartbreak. The pain deepened through miscarriages she suffered before becoming a mother. Those losses stayed mostly private, but they marked her. They made her hunger for a real home even stronger. They also added fuel to her determination to build a working life that could keep Desi near her instead of always out on the road. That need, mixed with her rising success in radio, eventually led to the biggest fight of her career. When CBS became interested in bringing My Favorite Husband to television, Lucille wanted Desi to play her husband. The network resisted. Executives did not believe American audiences would accept a red-headed American wife and a Cuban husband as a romantic pair. Their refusal carried the ugly logic of the era. Lucille did not bend. She would not do the show without him. So she and Desi took the act on the road, performing together live and proving to sold-out crowds what the network failed to see. Their chemistry was not a theory. It was obvious. It was electric. And once that success became impossible to ignore, CBS finally gave in. That decision changed television. Lucille and Desi formed Desilu, and put their own money and risk into the production. They agreed to film in Hollywood instead of New York. They worked out ownership terms that seemed radical at the time. They used multiple cameras and performed before a live studio audience, creating a style that felt immediate and alive. Then, on October 15, 1951, I Love Lucy premiered. It did not just succeed, it exploded. The show rose fast because people felt something real inside it. The comedy was sharp, but the connection was deeper than jokes. Lucille had spent her whole life learning how to hold attention in chaos, how to turn embarrassment into rhythm, how to stay standing after rejection. All of that poured into Lucy Ricardo. The woman once told she had no talent now commanded the biggest audience in America. And when Lucille became pregnant again during the show, she pushed to bring that reality into the story, too. The network panicked. Sponsors worried. The word pregnant itself was treated as too delicate for television. Yet once again, she fought. And once again, she won enough to move the culture forward. The famous hospital episode in January 1953 drew an astonishing audience and even outperformed major national events. At that point, Lucille Ball was no longer chasing entry into the industry. She was remaking it. Behind the scenes, she did far more than act. She shaped scripts, approved decisions, watched the details, protected the tone, and understood production in a way that many powerful men around her had not expected from her. Over time, that control only grew. After her marriage to Desi finally collapsed, and their divorce became official in 1960, she kept building. The end of their relationship was painful, and by then, years of fighting, alcohol, infidelity, and accumulated hurt had worn them both down. Yet even after the marriage ended, the bond between them never vanished completely. It simply changed shape. Professionally, though, Lucille moved forward with remarkable force. She bought Desi's share of Desilu and became the first woman to run a major television studio on her own. The girl who had grown up in unstable houses and uncertain rooms now stood at the head of one of the most important production companies in the business. By 1952, Lucille Ball was finally living the dream she had fought for. I Love Lucy was exploding in popularity. Her face was everywhere, and America could not get enough of her. Then, right at that moment, a scandal from her past came rushing back and threatened to tear it all down. The trouble began with old records from the 1930s. In 1936, Lucille had signed a California voter registration form saying she was affiliated with the Communist Party. That same year, she also backed the campaign of Emil Fried, a communist candidate running for office. State records even listed her as a delegate connected to the party. Then, in 1938, she signed another voter form that again tied her to communist affiliation. On top of that, a Hollywood writer later testified that a communist class for new members had taken place inside Lucille's home in 1937, and that Lucille knew about it. There were even claims that in 1940 she had stepped in for a sick communist speaker during party-linked radio broadcasts. Taken together, it looked serious. It looked real. And in the middle of the Red Scare, that kind of thing could destroy a career in a single night. Lucille denied that she had ever truly been involved. She said the whole thing went back to her grandfather, Fred Hunt, an old socialist who lived with the family and cared deeply about politics. According to Lucille, he had pushed everyone in the house to register the way he wanted because he felt strongly about workers' rights and would get so upset that the family feared for his health. She insisted she never actually voted communist, never attended party meetings, and knew nothing about some of the official roles tied to her name. When investigators questioned her again in 1953, she repeated the same story. She held to it exactly. What made the timing even more dangerous was how huge I Love Lucy had become. The show had millions of viewers every single week. Sponsors had poured enormous money into it. If this story had surfaced before Lucy became America's favorite television star, her career might have ended right there. Plenty of others had been blacklisted for less. Then the story burst into public view. A radio broadcaster began talking about a major television star with communist ties. Soon after, Lucille's name came out, and the newspapers ran with it. Front pages screamed about her old registration records. Reporters crowded the studio. Her clean and lovable image suddenly looked cracked. Overnight, the woman who made America laugh was being pulled into one of the ugliest fears of the era. That could have been the end of it. Instead, something happened that changed the mood completely. At the next taping of I Love Lucy, Desi Arnaz stepped in front of the live audience before filming began. Everyone in the room knew what was happening outside. The tension was thick. Then Desi looked at the crowd and delivered the line that saved the night. He said the only thing read about Lucille Ball was her hair, and even that was not real. The audience exploded. They laughed, cheered, and kept cheering. The support went on so long that filming was delayed. In that one moment, Desi turned fear into relief and panic into applause. A few days later, Lucille and Desi spoke publicly and repeated her explanation about her grandfather. Fans stayed loyal. The sponsor did not pull away. Instead of collapsing, her popularity held strong. In fact, it grew. The scandal that could have buried her somehow passed without destroying her. Questions remained, and critics never fully let it go, but the public had made its choice. America wanted Lucy. That survival mattered because Lucille was not just a star. She was becoming something much bigger. As the years moved on, she stepped into real power in Hollywood. At a time when women were almost never allowed to run anything at that level, Lucille Ball tightened her grip on Desilu Productions and made herself impossible to ignore. That power, though, came with another story unfolding right beside her. And this one played out much closer to home. When Vivian Vance first arrived to rehearse for I Love Lucy in 1951, Lucille took one look at her and hated what she saw. Lucille had a very specific idea for Ethel Mertz. She wanted someone plain, frumpy, older-looking, and in no danger of stealing attention. Vivian did not fit that picture at all. She had stage presence. She carried herself with confidence. She looked polished. She was attractive. Worst of all, from Lucille's point of view, she felt too close to Lucy herself. Lucille reacted immediately. She told Vivian she could not play Ethel. She thought Vivian was too pretty, too well put together, too much of a threat to the image she wanted. For Vivian, that first meeting must have felt like walking straight into a wall. Still, she did not give up. She asked for 1 week. That 1 week changed everything. By the next rehearsal, Vivian had transformed herself. She dyed her hair into a harsh, washed-out blonde. She changed the way she dressed. She hid her figure under unflattering clothes. She leaned into the matronly look Lucille wanted. In a matter of days, she reshaped herself into Ethel Mertz. It worked. She kept the job. And just like that, one of television's most famous comedy pairings was born, but the role came with a price. Vivian may have won the part, but she also had to swallow the humiliation that came with it. Her beauty had to be dimmed. Her figure had to be hidden. Her image had to be pushed down so Lucy could stay clearly at the center. Costumes, hair, makeup, and camera choices all helped build that illusion. Lucy glowed. Ethel was made to look ordinary. The audience loved the contrast, and the show thrived on it. But for Vivian, that daily transformation fed a hurt that never really left. Over time, stories spread that Vivian had even been forced to stay heavier than Lucille. That tale turned into one of the most famous bits of gossip around the show. But the truth seems less clear and more cruel in a different way. The famous weight clause appears to have started as a joke, a gag gift that played right into Vivian's insecurity. Even if it was never a real legal rule, the damage was still there. The image of Ethel as the less glamorous woman was carefully maintained, and Vivian lived inside that image for years. She made it work because she was brilliant. That part is easy to forget when people focus only on the tension. Vivian gave Ethel warmth, timing, sharpness, and life. She made the character unforgettable. Viewers adored her. She won awards. She helped turn the show into a phenomenon. Yet even while the audience laughed, resentment quietly kept growing underneath the surface. That resentment only deepened because Lucille controlled everything around her. She was not just acting in the show. She was shaping it. She had a hand in how scenes looked, how characters were framed, and how far anyone else was allowed to shine. Vivian's talent was obvious, but the structure always reminded her that she was second. She was important, but never equal. And that was not the only difficult relationship on set. Vivian and William Frawley, who played Fred Mertz, famously could not stand each other. Their dislike started early and never really cooled. Vivian hated being matched with a man so much older than she was. Frawley had his own barbed way of dealing with people, and he gave as good as he got. Their insults became part of the air around the show. Off camera, the relationship was rough. On camera, though, that tension often turned into comedy gold. Lucille saw it and used it. She understood that real irritation could create real spark. So instead of calming things down, she often let that friction stay alive. The bickering between Fred and Ethel felt believable because a lot of it came from genuine annoyance. It sharpened their scenes. It made their marriage feel funny, loud, and lived in. The audience responded to it without knowing what was feeding it underneath. In a strange way, pain helped power the laughter. For Vivian, the emotional strain kept building. The pressure of the role, the way she was styled, the constant comparison, the difficult relationship with Frawley, and the feeling of being trapped inside Ethel all wore her down. She reportedly turned to therapy in the middle of the 1950s, which was unusual for the time. She was trying to keep herself together while making millions of people laugh every week. That contrast says a lot about what success can look like from the outside and how different it can feel inside. Still, the machine kept moving. The show stayed huge. The money grew. Desilu grew. And Lucille Ball kept becoming more powerful. Once she fully took control of Desilu, she ruled it with fierce certainty. She made hard calls, cut actors loose when she felt she had to, controlled scripts and budgets, and protected her brand with relentless focus. In one sense, that control made her a trailblazer. She built something no one expected a woman in Hollywood to build. She turned television into business power and made sure she was not just the face of success, but the one steering it. At the same time, that same control left scars. The people around her often felt how sharp that power could be. Vivian especially felt it in contract talks, in pay gaps, and in the unspoken truth that no matter how much she contributed, the show would always belong to Lucy first. By the time they moved into later projects, the old tension had hardened. Vivian came back for the Lucy show, but life had changed. She was older. She had remarried. She was living far away and making exhausting cross-country flights to keep working. The travel wore her down. Her marriage felt the strain. The job no longer felt worth what it was costing her. Then came the contract demands. Vivian wanted more money, more control, and more respect. From her side, it probably felt overdue. From Lucille's side, it looked like too much. They had both spent years carrying old hurt, and now there was no room left to smooth it over. The split finally came. Vivian left as a regular, and even though she returned for guest spots, the easy magic of their old partnership was gone. What followed was not one dramatic explosion, but a colder kind of ending. Publicly, they could and did smile. They could appear together, speak politely, and let fans believe the old bond was still strong. Privately, the warmth had faded. Too much had happened. Too much had been swallowed and never resolved. Their history was too important to erase, but too painful to relive honestly. And yet, even after all of that, the connection between them never fully disappeared. When Vivian Vance entered her final years, her health began to fail badly. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in the 1970s. She went through major treatment, but the illness spread to her bones. Then came a stroke that left her partly paralyzed and deeply dependent on others for care. The woman who had once moved across the screen with perfect comic timing now faced a painful and slow physical decline. John Dodds, her husband, stayed with her, and close friends helped care for her. The suffering was real, and it kept getting worse. By then, the bright years of television glory must have felt very far away. Lucille did visit her near the end. That moment mattered. After all the years of distance, all the buried resentment, all the unfinished feelings, there was still something there that could not be denied. Lucille reportedly left in tears. Whatever had gone wrong between them, whatever bitterness had built up, it did not erase what they had once been to each other. Vivian died on August 17, 1979, at the age of 70. Her death hit hard, and for Lucille, it seems to have opened something deep. For all their conflicts, Lucille was devastated by the loss. Vivian had been part of her rhythm, part of her greatest work, part of a time in life that could never be repeated. Years later, Lucille would still speak with real admiration about Vivian's talent, almost as if distance had made her see even more clearly what had been there all along. Sometimes grief does that. It strips away the fight and leaves only the truth of what someone meant.